All right, once again, Bill Daley. I think of him when we had family and relatives that lived in Chicago, and the Daleys were in charge for a long time. Thank you very much for joining us. Here you go. Thank you.
That was really funny. I can't tell you why I was delayed, but it was really funny. Bill Daley just might be one of the 10 most consequential people ever to grace this stage. He has no idea what I'm about to say, and he's slightly terrified of where I'm going.
I am. That's honest.
Thank you for trusting me. Bill Daley is vice chairman of Wells Fargo, which is one of the largest money center banks in the world. We'll get into that. They've had great moments. They've had interesting moments. They've had bad moments. They're beginning to have great moments again. That's the backstory for this conversation. Because you don't do business with companies or governments, you do business with people. It's about relationships. Who do you have a relationship with? And Bill, in this room, you were with Ambassador Young last night, we both were, that special moment. This is the room that Dr. King gave his last SCLC annual meeting with Andrew Young and others, planning the Poor People's Campaign in 1967. And the reason I say to you that Bill Daley is one of the most consequential people ever to grace the stage of Hope Global Forum is because of the life he's lived and his father. You're looking at political history sitting right here. So you know he's the vice chairman of Wells Fargo. Okay. He was also chief of staff to the first black president in the history of the United States of America, President Barack Obama. He was also Secretary of Commerce, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, for what some joke in the black community was really the first black president, President Bill Clinton. His brother was mayor of Chicago. His father was the dean of politics and the mayor of Chicago. I'm gonna go one step further. And there's only so much of this I have license to say, and Bill can go as far as he wants. I don't think there would have been a President John F. Kennedy if it wasn't a Mayor Bill Daley. Pretty powerful statement. Bill, help me help the audience walk back through history around the same time that Dr. King was campaigning for not only civil rights, but social justice and economic empowerment. He was also in Chicago, we know that. But let's back up a little bit to you being a child and seeing interesting phone calls come in for your father from a certain John F. Kennedy.
John, thank you for the opportunity to speak and to engage at this forum. We're proud as Wells Fargo to be part of this in trying to make America a better place and make our company a better place.
Yep.
I am fortunate, come from a big family. There were 7 of us. I was the youngest. By the time I think they came to me and was like, okay, whatever you want. So I engaged a lot with my dad as a young kid, as we were all active in politics. Kennedy and my dad had a long relationship, friendship. Obviously, the opportunity as a Catholic, Irish Catholic American, to see the first Catholic president was a big piece of the enthusiasm that my dad had for him.
Yep.
It was groundbreaking. And so he and my dad were close. So he would call the house, would answer the phone, talk to him. He was very personal, a great politician. And he was part of the change that was coming to America, culturally, socially, racially, and that was coming to all of America. And my dad is mayor of a city that was very conscious of race and the difficulties and the opportunities. And politically, my dad, in addition to being mayor, was chairman of the Democratic Party, which some people thought was as powerful as being mayor, to be frank with you. When you put those together, it was pretty powerful. Old system, old days. But he saw in Kennedy a real generational shift and an opportunity to make America better. It was ended, obviously, rather dramatically. But we had chances to go to the White House the day after the inauguration. We were next to Harry Truman. We were the second guests there. And I told John a story. So I was 11 years old, and we're sitting in the cabinet room waiting for the president to come from the residence, next to the Rose Garden. And then you fast forward, that was in 1961, January. And you fast forward to January of 2011, and my wife and I are sitting at the same exact table looking out, and there is President Obama coming for the residents over to greet us, to then announce me as his chief of staff. And I thought, what a change in America, and what an opportunity for me to be part of that history. So lots of other things politically and business-wise I've been fortunate to be in. But I have to say, your dinner last night, to listen to Ambassador Mayor Young, and I've had the opportunity to be around him a few times, and obviously he is as sharp as ever. But he is one of the most consequential people I have met in my life. And I've had a pleasure of meeting. But when you see how he views his life and what's happened in the life of America, it's really phenomenal to listen to him and his insights. So I've been lucky.
Yeah,
You're lucky.
you leaned over to me and you're like, my God, he's just sharp as a tack. I mean, he doesn't miss a beat. And 89 years old, does not miss a beat.
And the way he not only remembers things, obviously, from 50, 60 years ago, but how he puts it in the context of today for younger people and the issues of today. That's, to me, the most remarkable. He's not just telling stories.
Yep.
He's taking those events and what was maybe going on then and interpreting them today for us today.
Yep. And let's go back.
Yeah.
Agreed. Let's go back to your father for just a moment. When Kennedy was assassinated, well, I guess let's step back. No, this is right, the right timeline. When Kennedy was assassinated, you said something happened to your father that you'd only seen one other time in your life. What was that?
He cried that evening. It was Friday, the 22nd of November, and the only other time I saw him cry was when his father passed away. And it was, as a little kid, you're like kind of stunned. And it was that impactful to him because he saw so much hope for America in Jack Kennedy. And then there was the period of, now what? And he then aligned very closely and was close with Lyndon Johnson before. Lyndon Johnson once said he was the only politician he met when he was trying to get support to run against Kennedy who told him the truth and said, no, I'm with Kennedy. Everybody else tried to fudge because he was the Senate Majority Leader and they didn't want to offend him. My dad just said, sorry, I'm not with you.
And there's all these stories which you can't tell about your dad and phone calls that came in from different people, including Johnson. But as we pivot here, Dr. King came to Chicago. It wasn't all peaches and creams. It was a very tough campaign. Your father was stuck in the middle of these political dynamics and headwinds, and he did as best he could to I guess, negotiate his way through that as a politician. Looking back in hindsight, do you think that there was any clearer pathway, or we were just in a messy place in America at that time?
You know, to be very honest with you, John, listening to Ambassador Young speak of that time,
Yep.
and the perception is that Martin Luther King and the movement and my dad were all this. And listening to the ambassador, the nuance of everybody kind of understood their roles, and they were all trying to move together,
right.
both limited by their
That's right.
experiences or their movement. Or my dad, who, you know, he came from a different generation. I'm the mayor. You know, I've got to balance this.
Yep.
And it was a very different city. And I think we oftentimes, when we look at history, especially today, we want to look at it based upon the world as it is today.
That's right. Right.
And not understand and appreciate. And that's where I think, again, Ambassador Young so perceptively explains that difference. And I think, especially for young people today, they should have that sort of lens that they look at history through.
Constantly improving, and this is why. So now I'm pivoting.
Yep.
Now I'm pivoting to you, because that's you. You're like a constant software upgrade. We've had these conversations, so let's now go to.
Yep.
I've become friends with Charlie Scharf, your CEO. I've known him for a long time. I consider us friends, and Charlie got into a bit of a mess culturally during the 2020 year of sensitivity, where I don't think he said the right things that comported with his heart. He's a good man. I've met him. I think he's a decent human being. As I told Charlie, as I told you, I think Charlie lived in a bubble. He grew up in a bubble. He was privileged. It's like the Ambassador Young will say to people, it's not your fault that you were born white. It's not my fault that I was born black, but it's our responsibility from this day forward to try to be the best people we can to bridge these gaps. And that's what I said to Charlie, and I said to you, and the beauty was, in a private room, nobody listening, you guys were open. You guys were open to what was being said to you. You're open to a new understanding. Charlie didn't get his back up when I told him, I think, just the truth. He had the privilege of his background. It's not his fault. But he was trying to say, okay, what he's done now, by the way, is I think he's opened his lens. But if there was a book that you should write, I think it should be Counselor. Because you were counselor to your dad, counselor to your brother, counselor to the nation as Secretary of Commerce, which I think is your best, which is probably one of your favorite positions, Secretary of Commerce. Counselor to our first black president, counselor to President Clinton. And now you're counselor to Charlie Scharf. I mean, your office is right next to Charlie's. When I was in there, he proudly pointed to Bill Daley's office next door, even you weren't there. And clearly he respects your counsel. And I firmly believe rainbows only follow storms. You and I had a half dozen conversations during that time. And we didn't agree on everything, but you always listened. And you valued what was being said to you, and you went back and thought about it. And then you empowered Darlene Goins and others Gigi and others to move on these things. And a year later, I go back in, and you guys have actually done a lot of the things that I didn't think you were going to do. You have moved on diversity and inclusion. You made senior points. Tell the guys.
Well, yeah, you know, when Charlie's comments came out, and one can argue whether they're misinterpreted, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. Charlie embraced an apology immediately and meant it. Sure. And we talked about it. It was either a crisis or an opportunity.
Right.
And he really took an opportunity. And we began to look at some of the immediate actions he took to not only create a senior person on our operating committee for diverse equity and inclusion, not focused just on inside of what our employment face looked like, but more importantly, or as importantly, what we do as a bank in communities of color, and obviously the financial industry has a long history and a bad history, to be frank with you. And I can say that not having been in it my whole life, but it's the reality. And I think there is an acknowledgement. Your previous speaker from Truist, you know, it's the new leadership of the world. And of America that's going on that I think understands that. So we've made lots of changes. We've engaged on our products. We've engaged in one of the things I'm most proud of is Charlie announced even before the George Floyd murder and the awakening that seemed to come from that. A $50 million investment in MDIs. I come from Chicago, where minority
depository
institutions,
banks, yeah.
which were numerous in Chicago, and they've shrunk. Those that have been around were really struggling and are still struggling. But when you look at some of them, 100 years old, surviving through the Great Depression, through all of the crisis, the economic crises we've had, but still in business, and many of them still family-owned businesses, I thought it was important that we engage with those institutions, not just with capital, but with our capabilities, technology-wise, ATMs. How can we help them? Because those banks are foundations in communities that people, especially small businesses, depend on, and some businesses that never have had a bank account. Right. So we were the first bank. Now many other banks have stepped forward. When the PPP program came along, Charlie made the decision we would take all of our gross fees, which amounted to about $420 million, and invest those back into small businesses through CFIs, through financial counseling, and we've got the last $100 million we're going to give away. Again, focused on small businesses, primarily in Black and Hispanic communities. And our next plan that we're going to announce very shortly is going to be really unique for small businesses. So I think it's given us an opportunity to re-engage in communities that we weren't that engaged.
Yeah.
As a business opportunity.
That's right.
Not as a social service organization. We aren't. We give a lot of money away, but that's in furtherance of our bank, and the only reason we have money to give away is because we make money.
So this is a very important point. And I was with Charlie 2-3 weeks ago. The meeting was supposed to be a 20, 30-minute, what I call a courtesy call, and it went for an hour and a half. And it was mostly him talking. In fact, very much like the Bill Rogers conversation, I said to myself at about an hour, 10 minutes, I looked at my watch and said, I need to get out of here before he asked me to leave. But we were just having such a robust, important conversation. And he said at the end, John, we're about to pivot here, and we see the bottom of the economic pyramid as a huge opportunity for growth for the bank. And we want to do that really well. And I love that, because when you're talking about philanthropy, and by the way, when we were talking one day, I remember you saying our foundation gives away a couple $100 million, whatever the number is, every year. I'm not sure what the effectiveness is of that. We do give it away every year. We should be making sure this is impactful. Let's reimagine it. Again, you're always challenging even yourself to do better. Let me acknowledge, by the way, Wells Fargo was the first major bank to back Operation Hope after the Rodney King riots in 1992 in South Central Los Angeles. Be clear about that. You were the first bank I served on the advisory board of. Lynn Pike was your market president in Los Angeles after the Rodney King riots. You were the first bank to give me credibility. Your then vice chairman put his arms around me and said, this is a good guy, and backed me. I don't know if you know that history, but and I've been a customer of you guys for 30 years. And so I have seen you go through your ups and your downs and your iterations. I actually think you're on an upswing now that's very meaningful. And I think it's it's all about how you and Charlie and the team have responded to crisis. Life is about 10% what life does to you and 90% how you respond to it. You didn't react to it emotionally, you responded to it intelligently. So when you're trying to get philanthropic dollars, the bucket is really small because it's a percentage of profits. You follow me? You can only give, even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you got to first collect it like a capitalist. I'm giving you guys some funny stuff. It's just going right over your head. But if you're making a market opportunity, a business opportunity, how big is the marketing budget? Right. How big is the business development budget? Those budgets are enormous, billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars. You're unlocking, when people take you seriously, you're unlocking other buckets that don't exist when it's just about charity. So I love that they're expanding the lens. And what Charlie told me in our meeting, Bill, was he has expanded his view of the world in which we live in, and it's benefited him as a human being and the bank. And he was so comfortable in his own skin in that saying, and I just think that's a testament to his leadership. It's also a testament to you being a great advisor.
Well, I've enjoyed working with him because he is open.
Yep.
And the way you described his reaction when all of that happened last fall, he was like stunned.
Yep.
People would think
Yep.
that what they were interpreting,
Yep.
he said, he felt.
Yep.
And it was. And he told the story that he went to there's a conference of black directors that's held every year out in California. And about 3 or 4 years before this incident, Charlie went and listened to people's stories about their kids, you know, having to drive black and be conscious of being stopped. And to him, it was totally foreign. Yeah. He had no concept, which he then kind of embraced how sheltered in many ways his life was, which many people, obviously not unique to him. He grew up in a relatively middle-class family. His mother was a school teacher. You know, they weren't wealthy in the scheme of things. So I think it's made my own personal opinion, him a better person.
Yeah.
It's easy to say because you're not the guy who was the target. But I think, therefore, he's making his betterment for the company.
I'll end with this. Let me tell you how good your role has been and how good I think he is as a leader. When I started with Charlie, I was on the opposite side of the table talking to him. When I ended with Charlie, I was on the same side of the table, arm in arm with him. He's my guy now. So are you. Love you, man.
Thank you, John. Thanks, buddy.
Good luck with the rest of it. Thank you.